Hello and welcome to episode 27 of the Epochs of the Lotus Eaters. I'm joined by Bo, and following on from last week's episode about the Nika riots, I was quite interested in doing the life of the man who put down the Nika riots, Belisarius, the Agrippa of Justinian's reign, and I think he's again one of history's really interesting characters, I find, and wildly successful generals who doesn't get the credit he deserves when people on the internet are drawing up their list of best generals. Belisarius is never getting a look in, even though, I mean, did he ever even lose a battle?
He did, actually.
He lost one,
yeah, a couple early on,
right.
on, and there's a couple of indecisive ones. But nonetheless, I think Belisarius is one of those ones where, if you go beyond just sort of the sort of classic armchair historian level, people that have done a bit of reading that know Belisarius will rank him very, very highly. Because I think, although you've said before, there's been lots of commanders in history that never lost a battle, that doesn't necessarily mean you're the best or anything, does it? At all. So like Belisarius, like Napoleon lost a couple, but is still thought of as sort of a tactical genius.
Absolutely.
Same with Belisarius, although his record isn't unblemished, he is thought of as, highly capable is an understatement, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's sort of some sort of tactical genius, a logistical master.
Well, I was going to say about the logistics, because the whole thing about I mean, it's been about a decade since I've read about Belisarius, so you have to forgive any rust in my memory. But one of the things that always jumped out to me about Belisarius's campaigns is how much of a shoestring they were done on, and how much of an absolute miser Justinian was. Right, go reconquer the West, but also here's £5. Good luck. See what you can salvage. And so I think that speaks to the challenge that Belisarius is given, and how well he does with it, I think, is to his credit.
Oh, massively, yeah. It's all on the shoestring.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's all like just enough money and men to not completely collapse
the
whole time.
Yeah.
Because Belisarius is probably most famous for the reconquest of the West. But we're not actually going to talk about this in this one. We're going to break it up a bit.
Yeah.
So talk about his early career and things. And in the next epochs, we'll talk all about the sort of North African campaigns and the Italian campaigns. But just to say something on that quickly, is that it's kind of remarkable, though. Isn't it? I mean, like North African campaigns, like 1 year or 6 months even. Italy, to begin with, is a year or two. It gets all drawn out, and we'll get into it next time. But he's just known as just very, very good at the job.
He's excellent.
Of being a CO with very little reasources.
And he was loyal to Justinian the whole time, wasn't he?
Yeah, very much so.
I would have been worried about if I were Justinian. Right, so we've got this brilliant general who's just, who's very, very successful everywhere he goes. Have I got anything to worry about with that guy? And it turns out he didn't. So I was lucky.
Well, because how many guys, especially after sort of the crisis of the 3rd century, how many guys are given a sort of a large command somewhere and then just declare themselves an emperor of the West or something?
I wouldn't be able to count the number.
Yeah, right.
It's ridiculous numbers. I mean, it just speaks volumes about Justinian as well, actually, now I think about it. But
he's able to control his commanders,
Exactly.
Yeah.
That he's able to sort of, from his own obscure origins, as it were, to maintain that kind of gravitas and majesty that is required to imprint in men's minds that he's legit. And, because Belisarius is like, well, I control the army. Who are you? Why do I need you? But he doesn't. And so it's very interesting.
It's funny how things go like that, especially in the ancient world when you haven't got loads and loads and loads of information. We do happen to have a fair bit from Procopius on this. But nonetheless, what was that magic thing that Hannibal had that meant no one ever revolted against him, yet he remained loyal to the Carthaginian Senate, never sort of went out on his own? What was it about Alexander that meant that the empire, there was no real question that it would all fall apart while he lived?
Well, we talked about that with the Machiavelli book club that we've done, actually. So we actually have some ideas. But no, you are right. It's like there's, because one thing that is very difficult to get from these sort of ancient histories is the dynamics of character that are going on between people. Like Belisarius obviously didn't have the impulse to become the emperor, He obviously wasn't looking for that.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously in prior centuries, you had a lot of people who were looking for that. But he seems to have been happy with his station in life, doesn't he? That's the thing.
Seems to be, yeah.
I never got, when I was reading about him, I never got any impression that he was grasping for anything greater. And he felt like a man doing service to me.
Yes. Yes.
Like not someone who's on the make for themselves, trying to have their own name in lights, which is, and again, this is why Belisarius, he came across as a softer character to me. There are some characters who come across as very hard edged, I mean, Alexander's one of them, he comes across, he's very he's got a lot going on. Caesar, again, another one of these hard-edged men. But you get some, and Hannibal's another one, but you get some who, like Pyrrhus and like Belisarius, come across a bit softer and almost kinder. I don't know how to describe it, because they're great warriors. They kill a lot of people, and yet they seem to have this kind of softness in their character, which I find appealing, weirdly.
Yeah, he seemed like a reasonable...
Yeah.
Like Alexander, if you catch him in the wrong mood, he's completely unreasonable.
I mean, he will literally kill you, like Craterus.
Yeah, and won't listen to reason, won't listen to what everyone's telling him.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it seems like, Pyrrhus not so much, and Belisarius. And Belisarius does get stuck in sometimes, rarely. He's not like Alexander or Pyrrhus, where he's chomping at the bit at every opportunity to be on the front line. Nevertheless, he does get involved in actual combat and acquits himself very well. So... I don't think I'd want a sword fight with the man.
No, God, no.
I'm sure he'd chop me to pieces.
Well, I'm sure all of them would chop me to pieces, to be honest.
Yeah. But he does seem reasonable, like one of those people sort of... you can think of them almost in the modern mould, like they're making decisions as a modern person, you imagine, probably would. Whereas you can't really say that about Alexander. He's very much of the ancient world, isn't he? He's doing things that only ancient people thought were sort of the norm.
I personally, Alexander, am going to charge at Darius, the Persian emperor, and this is how we win. Okay, I mean it works. So I mean, what do I know? But like,
Alexander, I didn't realise you were suicidal. But,
it's only suicide if I die. We'll talk about Alexander another time. Anyway,
so maybe a good place to kick off is sort of his background, and his sort of early life, because. As we mentioned in the other one about Procopius and the histories of the war and the secret histories, and the other book he wrote about buildings, where he also mentions Belisarius occasionally, things like that. So Belisarius himself came from basically nothing as well. So we talked about how Justinian's predecessor was his uncle Justin. And Justin and Justinian, that whole family, they were from, well, we're not 100% sure exactly, but Illyria, basically, maybe Thrace, maybe sort of modern-day Serbia. Yeah. Somewhere like that.
But before the Serbs and the Slavs arrived in the area.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, the Slavs... it's complicated. But of course, Serbia is a much, much more modern thing. There was no Serbia then, of course. But that is part of the Byzantine or the Roman Empire, isn't it? That part of the world, sort of the northern Balkan region, I suppose.
And it's been incorporated into the Roman Empire for hundreds of years at this point.
Oh, yeah, they've had Illyrian emperors for long ago.
Yeah, there's absolutely no memory of, not being a part of the empire. Totally incorporated. Very safe area.
Yeah. And so that's where Justin and Justinian's whole family were from. And Belisarius is sort of part of that. He's part of that clique. He's sort of from that part of the world. And so what happened was Justin wanted his own bodyguard, and sort of his own sort of ultra loyal bodyguard. And so he has this at the time, quite a young Belisarius in his 20s to sort of head that up. We think, it's probably because he's part of sort of this familial group, or he's part of the same...
Oh, it's very much like Augustus and Agrippa then. Where it's a sort of little cadre of people who obviously grew up and knew each other when they were before they entered into power and into the service and whatnot. And they retain these bonds going through. That's very interesting.
Yeah, so it seems that...
It's a model that works, right?
Yeah. I mean, I trust my oldest friends I've known since primary school, since secondary school. I trust them more than anyone else, I think.
Yeah, of course.
Other than perhaps your own immediate family.
Yeah. Oh, no, there are definitely members of my family I don't trust.
Right.
I
know what you mean.
Choose your friends.
Yeah. I can't remember where it was. Probably like a Family Guy joke or something. I can't remember where I heard it, but they said members of your family come and go, but the kids you were friends with in school are for life. It feels kind of true, doesn't it, in a way? But so anyway, he's part of this sort of Illyrian sort of clique, and so because Justin was sort of head of a sort of bodyguard for the emperor, so when he transcends into the purple, he needs sort of a replacement. So Belisarius seems to sort of fill that role. And so when Justin himself abdicates, or if you want to put it another way, when Justinian wrestles power from him, one way or the other, because he didn't rule for that long and he only ascended to the throne quite late in life, in his mid-60s.
Right.
And so anyway, once Justinian becomes emperor, he sort of promotes this Belisarius a little further even. He certainly gives him sort of, not an extraordinary command in the east, but a big command in the east. So, and he's still quite young. He's still sort of under 30 by this point, sort of in his late 20s, which, our world is quite different. So
yeah,
you would think someone who's under 30 is still young. We would just consider, well, you're still certainly
very young, in fact, we'd consider.
Whereas in those days,
for responsibility as well.
Yeah, for big responsibilities. Yeah. Whereas for those days, if you're not capable by the time you're in your early 20s, you probably won't ever be.
Yeah.
So it's not as weird. It's not as weird, I don't think.
I mean, even like there are loads and loads and loads of examples of men who I would consider to be insanely young for the level of responsibility they either inherit or are promoted to gain access to these high offices. I mean, there are simply loads. I mean, you've got the Alexanders who inherit their position at an incredibly young age. Okay, fair enough. But then you've also got the people like Scipio Africanus, who again very young, but dearth of talent around because Hannibal's killed it all. Well, okay, well, good luck, Scipio, and best of luck, have fun. So, that's another one for the graveyard. And this happens over and over, and not just in Rome, obviously, it's everywhere. It's the ancient world was nasty, brutish, and short.
Yeah. Well, when we were talking the other day about Machiavelli, where the King of France, Charles VII, can't remember, he invades Italy and takes the Pope hostage and stuff. Yeah. And he's like 18 years old or something. It's like, where'd you get the balls to do it? Just
Mad
the
lad,
chutzpah to go, okay, we're going to do that now. I mean, I don't know. It just feels like if you're like a grizzled veteran commander and you're in your 40s or 50s, you've seen it all before. Yeah. It makes a bit more sense. But when you're kind of a kid, really, and you go, let's do this massive thing, let's throw the chips high in the air and gamble everything.
I guess when you've got like 30,000 soldiers and you're 18 and you don't know much about the things around, you're like, well, let's just go do it. I mean, I think it's actually a lack of understanding of the complexity of the subject probably leads to a lot of these decisions. Honestly, I really do.
Yeah, I was watching a thing about how tankers, in modern day, people that young men that are in tank crews, quite often they want you to be young, because they're going to ask you. They might ask you to do something insane.
Suicidal.
Yeah. We want you to drive your tank through the middle of Baghdad and see if you get attacked.
I'm from military background. My dad's in the RAF, and so I grew up on camps and stuff. And a friend of mine went to Sandhurst, and by the time he was like in his early 20s, he found himself in charge of 4 Challengers. And
how old is he?
He was like 24, something like that.
It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it was. I was just like, well, I was like, it's fun. I bet it was.
Well, there's some people where large amounts of responsibility is just not a problem. It's water off a duck's back. Yeah. Whereas for me, I feel like commanding 4 Challengers, I'd be sort of crushed under that responsibility because you're talking about half a dozen men. Yeah. That their lives are in your hands. Yeah. I think you'd probably get used to it quite quickly. You'd have to.
Yeah. I mean, he had been through Sandhurst, so he's not like he hadn't been trained or anything like this. I mean, we're like us just dumped in the middle of the desert and go, right, these are yours, good luck. I mean, I wouldn't know what to do, but if you've been trained in it, I mean, you've probably got at least something to guide you.
Yeah. And not just tankers, sort of lots of frontline infantry regiments. You kind of want young guys. Yeah. Because they're much less likely to say no. Yeah. It's as simple as that. Yeah. They're much less likely to be paralysed by fear if you're 19 because you don't know any different, or you're more likely to do as you're told, really. Yeah.
So Belisarius, late 20s, gets a significant command in the east. What's going on in the east?
So there is a long and, almost endless, depending on how you look at it, a battle between the Byzantines and the Persians. Yes. And at this point, it's the Sassanid Persians.
Yeah, and there are different various shades and flavours of Persian. From like the Parthians in, Crassus's day, to the Safavids, the Sassanids, then you've got like various other dynasties that I can't even remember, to the Khwarezmians in the Middle Ages. And it's just like, okay, but it's basically the same flavour of like culture, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's just...
if people don't know, we're talking about the 500s AD, the early 500s, or the 520s, 530s, early 530s, that's what we're talking about, AD. And so, the Sassanid Persian Empire are something a bit different to sort of your classic Persians, like the Alexander days. But they're just on the map, their empire it looks the same. I mean, it's modern-day Iran and Iraq, basically. Big bits of modern-day Syria and stuff, up into sort of Armenia and the Caucasus and the eastern side of the Black Sea.
Yeah, probably goes like eastwards towards India and Afghanistan as well.
Yeah, you're out to the Indus Valley. Yeah. And the Arabian Peninsula is sort of it's not exactly clear, but they've got some kind of hegemony over that as
Yeah,
well. But
this was something I realized when I was learning about the early Muslim conquest. In fact, it's like the Sassanids had some kind of influence or interference in Arabia, but generally it wasn't that desirable a place, was it? I mean, it's difficult.
No, it's just desert.
Yeah,
and it's desert, like Australia or the Gobi Desert or something, or the Mojave Desert. There's nothing there, really.
Yeah, I mean, there are like spices and stuff. So
I mean, yes, I'm fair to say there's nothing there. Of course,
you can just trade for that, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So,
and of course, deserts are they're difficult to operate in.
Yes,
aren't they?
Yes.
So yes, that's the Sassanid Empire, and their ruler at that time is Kavad the First or Kawad the First. Mm-hmm. So he's sort of the main guy on the Persian side at this point. And now there's been a long and bitter on-off war, sometimes a cold war, sometimes a hot war between the Byzantines and the Persians at this point.
Now, just if as I understand it, this is essentially a sort of very flexible frontier that just moves back and forth. So if you've got a strong Roman emperor, then they end up sacking various cities on the Euphrates and Tigris, and if you've got a strong Sassanid Empire, they end up sacking a few cities on the seaboard of the Mediterranean, but eventually it comes back to a kind of equilibrium line down the middle, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. We'll put a map up so people can see exactly what we mean. Yeah. But yeah, they call it sort of what do they call it? The Trans-Caucasian region. Yeah. So yeah, it's more like an area. Yeah. Of conflict that goes back and forth a lot. And it's of course, even in the age of sort of Trajan, hundreds of years before this, the Roman world was extended far beyond the Euphrates. But at this point, the Euphrates seems to be within reason, sort of the boundary in the more southern theatre.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.